I sat frozen in the law office chair, the leather folder cool beneath my fingertips as the notary stamp thudded onto the page. Outside the window, sailboats drifted lazily across the Santa Barbara coastline, but inside, his words hung like smoke. She won't last another year anyway. My son's whisper was meant to vanish in the air, meant to dissolve between polished wood and ocean light. But after 38 years of sacrifice, after holding him through every sickness and setback, I was already written off. Expired. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The late morning sun spilled across the polished floor of Harold Lynn's law office, warming the old cherrywood table where Catherine Boyd sat with her hands neatly folded over a leather-bound folder. Outside the ocean view window, sailboats drifted like idle thoughts along the Santa Barbara coastline. But inside the room, the air was still and tense, every sound muffled under the weight of legal precision. Harold, steady as always, adjusted his tortoiseshell glasses and slid the final packet across the table. "These are the updated trust documents, Catherine," he said quietly, his voice respectful but measured. "Just the final review, and then we can proceed with filing." Catherine nodded once. Her silver hair, swept into its usual low chignon, caught the light. She didn't need to reread it. She had already studied the papers twice. Every clause, every contingency. The ink on the page was a formalization of a decision she had made months ago, long before her husband's ashes had cooled. Across from her, Ethan Boyd leaned back in his chair with the comfort of someone who believed everything was unfolding in his favor. He wore a blue linen shirt with the top buttons undone, tan skin glowing from another weekend at the beach house he'd been staying in for 3 years. Jenna, ever the accessory, scrolled her phone silently, fake lashes batting every so often at the screen like it was flirting with her. As Harold turned to retrieve a notary stamp, Ethan leaned forward, close enough for Catherine to smell his aftershave, something sharp and expensive. He chuckled under his breath, then whispered, almost conspiratorially, "She won't last another year anyway." Catherine didn't move. Her pulse didn't change. Her face remained a mask of placid focus, but inside, something ancient and sharp stirred like a blade being unsheathed. Behind him, Jenna gave a low, careless laugh. "Ethan," she murmured, not even looking up. The kind of laugh that says, "Stop, but don't." Catherine's fingers brushed the edge of the folder, then closed it slowly with both hands. The click of the clasp echoed in the quiet room like a gavel coming down. Harold paused, caught the shift in the room immediately. His gaze flicked from Catherine's face to Ethan's posture and back again. He said nothing, but his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice even. Catherine lifted her eyes and for the first time in weeks really looked at her son. His face was relaxed, smug. He genuinely thought she hadn't heard him, or that if she had, it didn't matter. She smiled, soft, painless. "Yes," she said, "let's move forward." She didn't glance at Ethan. She didn't acknowledge Jenna. She simply sat straighter in her chair, as if anchoring herself for something long overdue. Harold gave a small nod, sensing her tone more than her words. He tapped the papers back into order and pressed the notary stamp firm and final on the signature line. As the ink dried, the breeze outside shifted, rattling the window pane gently. Catherine glanced toward the ocean, where the water glimmered a little too bright for the time of day. She stood, slow but deliberate, and slipped the folder back into her tote. "Thank you, Harold," she said, her voice warm but clipped. Ethan finally looked up. "So, are we done here?" he asked, with the faux politeness of someone who resents needing permission. Catherine turned to him, face unreadable. "For today? Yes." And with that, She walked past him without a second glance, her low heels silent on the hardwood floor. Jenna looked up then, briefly confused, but said nothing. Harold watched Catherine leave, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Ethan, who was already pulling out his phone. "You might want to be a little more careful with what you say in this office," Harold said mildly. Ethan didn't even look up. "Why? She's not deaf." Harold paused, then smiled thinly. "No," he said, "she's not." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed once. Mid-afternoon. Catherine Boyd sat alone at the dining table of her hillside home, the late light slanting in through the west-facing windows. The folder she'd carried from Harold's office now lay open in front of her, flanked by a second, older folder pulled from her file cabinet an hour earlier. She pushed her reading glasses higher on her nose, eyes scanning slowly over the deed to the Ventura Shores property. Her name was printed in bold, undisturbed type at the bottom. Catherine E. Boyd, sole owner. Not Catherine and Ethan Boyd. Not even a co-signatory. Sole owner. Her fingers didn't tremble as she lifted the page, just firm and methodical. She laid it over the rest of the stack and leaned back in her chair, staring at the watercolor painting above the mantel. It had been Harold's wife who'd given it to her, years ago, when she and James first bought the place. A beach scene, loosely brushed, all soft motion and shifting blues. The house had been a retirement fantasy, and now it was a quiet trap her son believed he'd claimed by charisma and proximity alone. She closed the folder. No lock, no fence, no trust. Just a name that was still hers, and his assumption that it would always be his. She reached for the yellow legal pad beside her and flipped to a clean page. On the top line, she wrote 2 words in block print: Vacation House. Then, beneath it, a column of dates. Mortgage paid off in full. Insurance records, property taxes. Everything lined up. Everything current. Everything documented. She remembered the way Ethan had stood in the doorway that night, 3 years ago. James had just come home from his 3rd round of chemo, frail and exhausted. Ethan had looked down at the carpet while he said it. "Just for a little while, Mom. We just need some space. Fresh air. Something quiet." Catherine had said yes. James had nodded, too tired to think through it. And they'd moved in the next weekend with boxes full of seasonal pillows, ring lights, and everything Ethan and Jenna considered beach chic. What was supposed to be a few months had silently hardened into permanence. Until now. She picked up her phone and scrolled to Nina Reyes in her contacts. The name hadn't been used in over a year, but she knew Nina was still active. Still sharp. It rang twice. "Catherine Boyd," Nina said, her voice brisk but warm. "My goodness, it's been a minute." Catherine smiled faintly. "Hello, Nina. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "I'm walking into a showing, but you've got 60 seconds," Nina replied. She wasn't one for pleasantries. "I need to talk to you about listing the beach house," Catherine said simply. A pause. Then Nina exhaled, short and certain. "Is it vacant?" "No," Catherine said, "but it's not theirs." There was silence for half a beat. Then the familiar click of Nina's mental gears turning. "If you want it gone, it's gone," she said. "I've got stagers, photographers, inspectors on standby. You just say the word." Catherine looked down at the deed once more, then stood from the table, every motion controlled. "I'll send you the address this evening," she said, "and I'll need it handled discreetly." "Of course," Nina said. "I'll make sure it moves so fast, they'll think it was a dream." As she ended the call, Catherine walked to the kitchen sink and poured herself a glass of water. Through the open window, she could hear the ocean breeze whispering through the palm trees that lined the back fence. Somewhere out in Ventura Shores, Ethan was likely lounging on the back deck of her house, beer in hand, thinking he had already won. She sipped her water and set the glass down gently. Tomorrow, he'd start to lose, without even realizing the game had started. The light was golden and soft. One of those fake perfect California mornings where even the wind seemed filtered. On Instagram, the beach house looked like a lifestyle ad. Jenna had chosen her angles carefully. The corner of the infinity pool, the white chaise with its freshly fluffed cushions, her oversized sunglasses reflecting the ocean. The caption beneath the photo read, "Manifesting this forever. Cha grateful wa beach vibes. Our home." She tagged Ethan and added a location pin. Ventura Shores Dream House. Catherine saw it while sipping coffee at her kitchen window, the cup warm in her hands, the silence around her unbroken. She didn't flinch, didn't sigh. She simply studied the photo like a puzzle piece sliding quietly into place. In the background of the shot, someone had left a beach towel draped over the wrought iron railing, bright, clashing, loud. Ethan's, no doubt. She tapped her screen and forwarded the post to Nina with a single note. Wednesday morning, 9 to 1. They're both at work. 3 minutes later, Nina replied. Staging crew confirmed. Truck stays out of view. By Wednesday at 8:55 a.m., the side gate at Ventura Shores creaked open just wide enough for two quiet professionals in soft-soled sneakers to slip inside. The team Nina had hired was experienced, fast, and operated with the same discretion as a crisis PR firm. They moved like dancers, each choreographed step practiced to avoid noise, damage, or delay. Throw pillows disappeared. The garish, "Bless this mess" kitchen sign went in a crate. The tacky seashell photo collage Jenna had hung in the hallway was replaced with a single framed coastal print. The house, which had absorbed their clutter and their delusions, began to breathe again. By noon, the transformation was complete. Every surface gleamed. The staging crew packed up and left just minutes before Jenna's car would return. And in a quiet corner of her study, Catherine clicked the final signature on the preliminary sale documents Harold had uploaded that morning. A soft ding sounded as the PDF was confirmed. A breeze moved through the house. She didn't stand to celebrate. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and let the moment settle inside her like warm stone, satisfying, heavy, undeniable. The machine was in motion now. An hour later, her phone buzzed. Nina Reyes. Market's hot. This will move fast. Catherine texted back. Good. They've been comfortable for too long. That evening, scrolling again, Catherine saw another post from Jenna. This time, it was a boomerang. Jenna spinning in a flowy cover-up on the sand, with the caption, "Love where you live, baby. Our shelter, ha-cha, manifesting, ka-ka, blessed." Catherine's lips twitched. Manifesting. She closed the app. Upstairs, in the spare room that used to be James's den, she opened a trunk at the foot of the bed. Inside, photo albums, neatly labeled in her handwriting. She flipped one open, running her fingers over a photo of James from the first summer they'd bought the house, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes laughing under a pair of crooked sunglasses. That house had been earned, not wished into existence with hashtags and entitlement. She slipped the album back into the trunk and shut the lid gently. Then, just as she turned to leave the room, her phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail from Harold. His voice was calm but firm. "Catherine, just spoke with escrow. We have a buyer. Full cash. No contingencies. If you're ready, they'll want possession within the week." She stood in the darkening room. The faint sound of ocean wind pressing against the window glass. No ceremony, no announcement, just possession within the week. She tapped save voicemail, then whispered under her breath, more to the air than to herself. Let's see how they manifest that. The tea was chamomile, steeped long and strong, its steam curling upward in lazy spirals as Catherine sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, silence blanketing the house like a pact. Her reading glasses rested low on her nose, and a printed copy of the offer contract lay beside her, marked up in blue pen. Not from doubt, but from diligence. She'd been up since 6. Harold had sent over 3 potential buyers before sunrise, each one vetted, verified, and real. But one stood out. A retired couple from Monterey with cash on hand and a 10-day close timeline. No mortgage, no inspections, no contingencies. They didn't want the story of the house. They wanted the space. Perfect. She clicked the mouse once, reviewed the bid again, and confirmed it with a quiet sense of finality. Then she signed. The digital document folded itself into pixels, vanishing into Harold's encrypted drive with a satisfying blink. It was done. The house was sold. She leaned back, the chair creaking under her, and took a long sip of tea. Outside the window, the fog had started to lift off the hills, revealing streaks of sunlight like quiet declarations. It was going to be a warm day in Santa Barbara, maybe even hot. She glanced at her phone out of habit and saw a new message from Ethan. Ethan Boyd. Hey, we're thinking about redoing the deck before summer. Jenna wants one of those sunken lounge pits. Can you send like 15K? We'll upgrade the value. Catherine stared at the screen for a long moment. Not a greeting, not a question, not even a please, just an expectation, wrapped in entitlement served with a wink. She put her tea down, then typed. Not a priority. She didn't elaborate. She didn't soften the tone. She didn't sign it, Mom. 2 minutes later, Ethan replied. Ethan Boyd. Wait, are you mad about something? She locked her phone and set it face down on the table. In Harold's downtown office, sealed behind locked drawers and firewalled servers, the final documents were being prepped. Title transfers, disclosure waivers, wire confirmations. Everything silent, everything binding. Harold knew how to work beneath radar. And Catherine had been clear. Ethan was not to know. Not until there was nothing left to interfere with. She stood and walked to the window, watching a hummingbird hover in the branches of the jacaranda tree just beyond the porch. It darted, stalled midair, then zipped out of sight. The house on Ventura Shores was still full of Ethan's noise, his playlist echoing off the glass walls. His sandals kicked off by the kitchen island, Jenna's makeup scattered across the guest bath counter. But their presence was no longer power. It was clutter. Temporary. Markers of people squatting in a future they had never earned. Catherine's phone buzzed again, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she walked to her study and pulled a single manila envelope from the drawer. Inside were the original architectural plans for the beach house. Sketches James had obsessed over, notes scribbled in pencil on the back margins. She traced a corner with her fingertip, then folded the envelope shut and slid it into a box labeled, "To Keep." She sat in the quiet for a while, the sunlight inching across the floorboards. Then finally, her phone rang. Not Ethan this time. Harold Lynn. She picked up on the first ring. "It's confirmed," Harold said. "Escrow opened this morning. Buyers already wired the deposit. Once we close, they want to move in immediately. You sure you're ready for this?" "I was ready the moment he whispered," Catherine said. Harold didn't respond for a beat. Then, "I'll make sure every step stays quiet. No paperwork hits their radar until the final notice." "Thank you." She hung up and stared at the phone in her palm. Another buzz. Ethan Boyd. "Mom?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the small glass trinket box James had bought her on their 35th anniversary. Inside it, the original house keys to Ventura Shores, still clean and cool to the touch. She closed the lid slowly. The pen Harold handed her was a dark lacquered Mont Blanc, more ceremonial than necessary, but fitting. Catherine signed with measured grace, flipping each page with the same steady rhythm she once used shelving books in alphabetical order. Final disclosures. Seller's affidavit. Transfer of title. Her signature landed on the last line with no flourish, just full stops. Harold gathered the stack and tapped it into alignment. That's it, he said softly. Legally, it's theirs. Catherine exhaled, not relief. Completion. Harold leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady behind his glasses. Nina's handling keys and final walkthrough. She says the buyers are punctual, meticulous. You'll like them. I don't need to like them, Catherine said. I just need them to change the locks. He gave a small smile. Already arranged. Back in Santa Barbara, Ethan was busy pouring mimosas. The group text had gone out that morning. Housewarming brunch soon? Bring beachwear. Jenna's doing margs. Jenna followed it with a pastel-colored Canva invite that looked like it belonged on a wedding registry. Brunch by the shore, hosted with love by the Boyds. They hadn't even checked the mail. Catherine had. 2 days earlier, she'd stood at her kitchen counter with a stack of redirected utility bills from the Ventura Shores address. Gas, water, garbage, internet, and slipped them each into fresh envelopes with handwritten notes. Forwarding these, as they're no longer your concern. No explanation, no threats. Just the cold accounting of what was real. She mailed them from the post office downtown, personally. That morning, Jenna had posted a boomerang of herself in the beach house kitchen, holding a tray of glasses, smiling like a woman who thought life had finally granted her beachfront permanence. Catherine had watched it once, muted. She hadn't watched it again. Instead, she texted Nina. Confirm key handoff and closeout schedule. Nina replied instantly. Buyers are getting the keys tomorrow. Locksmith is meeting them at 4 p.m. In Catherine's world, timelines were kept. Deadlines meant closure. At 3:47 p.m., her phone rang. Harold. She answered before the second ring. It's done, he said. Transfer recorded, county sealed. Nina confirmed receipt. Keys handed off 10 minutes ago. There was a pause, the kind lawyers take before saying something that can't be unsaid. And, he added, the buyer's attorney filed a formal notice to vacate. Served directly. As of this afternoon, they have 72 hours to leave. Catherine didn't speak right away. She simply turned, walked to her living room window, and looked toward the coast, where the sky had started turning that soft silver blue it only did right before sunset. They'll see the notice tonight, Harold added. It was taped to the front door. Another pause. Then, quietly, Are you ready for their reaction? Catherine's voice was calm, certain. They weren't ready for mine. Down in Ventura Shores, the brunch invites were still circulating, RSVPs pinging Jenna's phone like tiny affirmations. She was choosing napkin colors. Ethan was looking up deck furniture, still under the illusion that he owned something more than square footage on borrowed time. But somewhere between the porch light and the welcome mat, a white envelope with legal letterhead now fluttered in the breeze. Catherine turned from the window, walked to the fireplace, and picked up the small bowl of loose keys she kept for guests. Quietly, she added one more, the now obsolete bronze key to the front door of a house that no longer belonged to her. No longer belonged to Ethan, and never really had. The breeze off the ocean was soft and salty, just strong enough to lift the corner of the paper taped to the front door. Ethan parked Jenna's white BMW crooked in the gravel and jogged up the path, sunglasses pushed back on his head, smoothie in one hand. His phone buzzed. Text from Jenna. Don't forget to ask her again about that deck money. Brunch RSVP count is at 18. He was still smiling when he stepped onto the porch. Then he stopped cold. A sheet of legal paper flapped once, sealed at all four corners with blue painter's tape. The font wasn't stylized. There were no emojis. Just stark, sans serif black type, in bold. Notice to vacate. This property has been transferred to new ownership. You are no longer authorized to occupy the premises. Please remove all personal belongings within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Below that, a law firm's name he didn't recognize. He blinked at it, frozen, then checked the address, then read the notice again. It still said what it said. Inside the house, the ceiling fan hummed peacefully above the open living room, the smell of fresh laundry mixing with eucalyptus candles Jenna insisted on lighting each morning. Ethan's brain sputtered. He yanked his phone from his pocket and called his mother, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same. He turned the doorknob. Locked. He cursed, stepped back, stared at the paper like it might apologize. His hands were shaking now. Across town, Jenna was mid-pedicure, filming a video for her story, muted waves in the background, a gloss of lavender polish across her toes. Captioned, Self-Care Sunday. Her phone buzzed. Ethan, get back here, now. Emergency. Not joking. She rolled her eyes, dropped a sigh into the camera, and hit end recording. I'm at the salon. What? Ethan sent a photo of the notice, zoomed in, fingers visible in the corner of the shot. We've been evicted. Jenna's scream cracked through the salon like someone had spilled boiling water. Heads turned. The nail tech jerked back in surprise, brush still mid-stroke. What do you mean? Evicted? Jenna shouted into the phone, not bothering to step outside. We live there. But the live audience of her social media had already gotten the scoop. Before she even got back to the car, Jenna had posted a story, shaky video of the taped notice. You guys, we've literally been robbed. Someone took our house. Our house. Like, we live there and they're trying to say, we don't? If anyone has a lawyer friend, DM me. This isn't over. Back at her own house, Catherine's phone vibrated twice, then went still. She didn't look at it. She was in the garden, kneeling in the soft loam, pressing fresh rosemary into the dirt between the tomato beds. The sun was high now, but she worked slow, methodical. No gloves, just her bare hands in the earth. Inside on the kitchen counter, her phone screen lit up with call after call. Jenna Boyd, Ethan Boyd, Ethan Boyd, unknown, Jenna Boyd. She ignored them all. That afternoon, Nina texted one sentence. New owners doing walkthrough tomorrow morning. We're all clear. And in a courthouse downtown, behind glass walls and a heavy door marked Probate Division, Cheryl Dean watched the Instagram video on her break, a half-eaten granola bar in her hand. She turned the sound off and watched Jenna's panicked face again. Then she opened the court record. Catherine E. Boyd, estate file active. She tapped her pen against her clipboard thoughtfully. This wasn't just family drama. It was about to become official business. The waiting room of Harold Lynn's office was unusually quiet that morning. Even the receptionist, normally a fixture behind the front desk, was missing. Out sick, Harold had said over the phone. Catherine didn't mind. She preferred the quiet. It gave her space to think. She sat alone in the leather chair by the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her tote bag at her feet. Outside, the Santa Barbara streets hummed with their usual Monday indifference. Parking meters blinking, seagulls circling, tourists sipping iced lattes they'd overpaid for. It was all so ordinary, which made today feel all the more sacred. Her phone vibrated again. Ethan Boyd, 7 missed calls. No voicemails, no texts. Just the brute insistence of someone who finally realized he'd lost something, and too late. She silenced the screen and slipped the phone into her bag without looking. Harold opened the door a moment later, legal pad in one hand, a dark envelope in the other. His tie was slightly looser than usual, like even he felt the weight of what they were about to do. Catherine, he said with that quiet steadiness she had come to trust. We're ready whenever you are. She rose, followed him down the familiar corridor, past framed degrees and vintage nautical maps. James had always loved those. A nod to order, direction, Safe passage. The conference room was already set. A single file folder on the table. A silver pen. Harold gestured toward the seat across from him. This is the new trust agreement, just you and the beneficiaries. Ethan's name has been removed entirely. As we discussed, no challenge clause, no contingencies. She nodded. He slid the paper toward her. You'll want to initial here and sign there. Catherine didn't hesitate. Her pen moved with purpose. Not anger, not even triumph, just clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt aligned with herself again, like a compass needle finally pointing home. When she finished signing, Harold turned the page and added his own signature beside hers. And the foundation? She asked. It's in, Harold replied. The Women's Literacy Alliance. Your contributions will fund 6 full-time reading specialists, community programs, a mobile library van, and they've reserved a plaque in your name. Catherine smiled. Small, but real. Good. He studied her for a long second. You sure you want to go public with it later? No, she said, and picked up the pen again. Let the work speak for itself. Across town, Ethan sat hunched over the kitchen island of the Ventura Shores house, surrounded by half-packed boxes, a pizza box, and silence. Jenna had stopped speaking to him the night before after threatening to sue both him and his mother, though she had no idea how lawsuits worked, and had said so on a live stream with raccoon eyes and too much wine in her glass. Ethan refreshed his inbox for the 4th time. Still nothing. No reversal, no explanation, no hint of mercy. He called again. Straight to voicemail. Down the hall, Jenna's voice erupted from the guest room. Ethan! He sighed. What now? You need to see this. She held up her phone, shaking it like a bomb. Someone had posted on a local Facebook group a quietly triumphant press release from the Women's Literacy Alliance. We are honored to announce the Catherine E. Boyd Literacy Trust, whose generous funding will expand women's reading access across California. The post had nearly 1,000 likes and comments. Jenna scrolled, expression unreadable. Didn't her son just get kicked out of her beach house? Karma. This lady's my new idol. She's giving rich grandma with a vengeance and I'm here for it. Jenna's face crumpled, not with sadness but embarrassment. Her curated life was unraveling in real time, and the audience that once adored her was now treating her like a meme. She stormed out of the room. Ethan just sat there, stunned. His name, the one he'd always assumed would come with money, property, legacy, was nowhere in that announcement. He didn't even rate a footnote. Back in Harold's office, Catherine stood to leave. She gathered her tote, nodded once to Harold, and headed for the door. Before she reached it, Harold said, You know, it's never too late to rewrite the story. She turned to him, calm and steady. I'm not rewriting, she said. I'm just correcting the record. The knock on the door wasn't gentle. It came in short, sharp bursts, angry, impatient, familiar. Catherine stood still in the kitchen, one hand resting on the tea kettle, the other adjusting the volume knob on the old record player by the window. The soft strains of Debussy began to play, just loud enough to fill the air with something other than noise. Another knock, then a voice. Muffled through the wood but unmistakably her son's. Mom, open the door. She didn't. Instead, she carried the kettle over to the counter and dropped a bag of Earl Grey into her favorite porcelain mug. The one with the small chip near the rim she never bothered to replace. She didn't need to see Ethan. She already knew what was on his face, some storm of disbelief, entitlement, and embarrassment that had curdled into rage. But still, out of curiosity, she walked quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. There he was, red-faced, sweat glistening on his temples. One fist still raised like he wasn't sure whether to knock again or punch the door down. His breath came in bursts. His shoulders heaved. You embarrassed us, he shouted. "Do you even get that?" Catherine said nothing. Inside, the kettle clicked off. The room filled with the scent of bergamot and steam. "I'm your son," Ethan said, stepping back, pacing the hallway like it had betrayed him too. "This is insane. You can't just erase me." Still, she didn't move. She let the music swell behind her. From the window, she could see Jenna idling in the BMW parked at the curb, scrolling frantically on her phone. Every so often, she'd tap the screen hard with her acrylics, like the device itself was conspiring against her. A moment later, Catherine's phone buzzed. Jenna Boyd, incoming call. She declined it. It buzzed again, voicemail, then a text. "We are lawyering up. You can't get away with this. This is a war. You'll regret it." Catherine stared at the message for a long beat, then turned her phone horizontally and took a screenshot. Quiet documentation. For Harold, eventually. Another knock. Ethan again. "I've got friends who are attorneys. We're going to court. You think this is over?" He was shouting louder now, drawing stares from a neighbor walking a dog. The woman glanced up at the commotion but said nothing, just tugged the leash and kept walking. Inside, Catherine stirred her tea, unfazed. The music moved into its next movement, Claire de Lune, soft and aching. She finally walked back to the front door and spoke through the wood. "One line," she said. Silence. "What?" Ethan asked. Catherine leaned close, her voice calm, low, surgical. "Consult your lease." And with that, she turned and walked away, her steps quiet on the hardwood. Outside, Ethan stood frozen for a moment, eyes wide. Then he cursed, loud and sloppy, and kicked the base of the door, not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to hurt his foot. He limped back down the hallway, muttering, furious. Jenna looked up as he approached the car. "Well?" she snapped. Ethan climbed in and slammed the door. "She's got it all locked down," he muttered. "It's like she's been planning this." Jenna gritted her teeth. "She has." She hit record on her phone again, this time aiming it squarely at herself. Day 3, still evicted, still no justice. But we're not backing down. Anyone know a media contact who wants a seniors behaving badly story? Call me. Catherine, upstairs now, sipped her tea by the window and watched the car pull away. She didn't post. She didn't reply. She simply opened her laptop and forwarded Jenna's latest voicemail to Harold with a short subject line. "For the file." The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting an institutional hum over the beige-walled conference room inside the Santa Barbara County Courthouse. Catherine sat perfectly still in the molded plastic chair, a soft navy cardigan folded neatly over her shoulders and her purse at her feet. She looked like someone waiting for a library board meeting, not a court-ordered psychological evaluation. Across the table, the court-appointed evaluator, Dr. Sis. Linda Croft, clicked her pen twice and made a notation on the top sheet of her yellow legal pad. "You understand why you're here today, Mrs. Boyd?" "I do," Catherine replied, voice steady. "And you understand this is a competency evaluation, not a criminal proceeding?" Catherine smiled faintly. "At my age, everything feels like a test. This one just has paperwork." Dr. Croft paused for a moment, assessing. Then she began. Questions about memory, estate decisions, family history, capacity, intent. Catherine answered every one with calm precision, her voice clear, her tone neither defensive nor fragile. She even made Dr. Croft laugh, genuinely, when she recounted the moment Jenna tagged herself Queen of the Boyd estate in an Instagram post and then misspelled estate. "I've kept journals," Catherine added near the end, reaching into her bag and sliding over a slim, leather-bound notebook. "Daily entries, financial records, phone logs, emails, everything's logged and dated." Dr. Croft raised her brows and flipped through the pages. Catherine sat back, hands folded. She didn't need to persuade. She only needed to tell the truth. And the truth had weight. 2 days later, courtroom 3C was at capacity. Ethan had shaved and put on a jacket, but the effort stopped there. He looked frayed around the edges, skin pale, knuckles raw from chewing, jaw tight. His attorney, a young litigator named Colton Pierce, sat beside him rifling through a manila folder like it might contain an escape hatch. Jenna was seated behind them in the gallery, arms crossed, sunglasses still on, even indoors. Her phone was out, camera already recording, for documentation. Catherine walked in alone, Harold trailing behind her. She wore a gray dress, low heels, and no expression. When Cheryl Dean called the court to order, Catherine's eyes flicked to her, just once. Calm. Measured. Cheryl gave a nod. Let's proceed. Ethan's attorney went first, rushed, vague, full of emotional appeal and performative concern. We're asking for temporary control over Mrs. Boyd's estate, he said. My client believes his mother may be acting under diminished capacity and undue influence. From whom? Cheryl asked flatly. Well, no one specifically. But the abrupt sale of the property, the exclusion from the trust, She passed her court-ordered evaluation, Cheryl cut in. You read that report? Colton fumbled. Yes, but... Then show me something else. Harold rose from his chair slowly, unhurried. He opened a file folder and placed 5 documents on the bench, one by one. Certified trust agreement, title transfer, sale disclosures, escrow logs, and digital correspondence, all signed, time-stamped, and notarized, in Catherine Boyd's full legal and mental capacity. Catherine stepped forward. I also brought backup copies, originals, and the ledger I've maintained daily since my husband's diagnosis, including all interactions with my son and daughter-in-law, if the court needs additional clarity. Jenna scoffed audibly from the gallery. Ethan's face flushed. Colton stood, whispering something urgently. Cheryl held up a hand. Mr. Pierce, unless you have a credible challenge, I withdraw, the attorney blurted. Respectfully, I can't continue representation. The room went still. Catherine tilted her head slightly. Cheryl looked down at the bench, then back up at Ethan, who was now visibly sweating. This court finds no basis to question Mrs. Boyd's competency or control over her estate, she said. And given the frivolous nature of this petition, Mr. Boyd, her voice hardened, you will be responsible for her legal fees, in full. The gavel cracked once. Jenna gasped. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Catherine turned, walked out without a glance back. Outside the courtroom, the sun was too bright for late September. She stepped into the light like someone who had just left a confessional, unburdened, not broken. Harold caught up to her on the steps. You all right? She adjusted her purse strap. I'm fine. Then, calmly, and now it's in the record. The headline ran in the Santa Barbara Independent the following morning, buried halfway down the homepage, but still visible enough to sting. Local heir loses legal battle against elderly mother in estate dispute, judge orders full reimbursement of legal fees. Frivolous, says court. Ethan saw it over breakfast, half a bagel in his hand, his phone balanced against the salt shaker. He read it twice, then slammed his fist on the counter. The article didn't mention Catherine's name until the second paragraph, but when it did, it was glowing. Boyd, a retired librarian and long-standing member of the Ventura County Literacy Council, was praised for her meticulous records and clear mental competency. There was even a quote from Cheryl Dean herself. This was one of the most thoroughly documented estate responses I've seen in years. The comment section was worse. Good for her. Entitled adult kids are the real pandemic. Get a job. Ethan. Imagine suing your mom and losing like that, Yikes. Ethan slammed his phone face down, but the damage had already spread. Jenna had been tagged 6 times before she even got out of bed. By noon, her Instagram following, once loyal, aspirational, #happy, had turned fully carnivorous. The DMs were brutal. A stranger had even left a 1-star Yelp review on her old event planning website. Wouldn't trust her to organize a closet, let alone a wedding. She tried clapping back on stories, blaming toxic boomers and broken systems, but it backfired almost instantly. Screenshots spread. Reposts mocked her tone. Hashtags like I's eviction influencer started trending locally. That afternoon, with trembling hands and glossy eyes, Jenna deactivated her account. Then she walked into the kitchen and told Ethan, "We are not posting anything else. Ever again." Across town, Catherine sat on her back porch, a sweater over her shoulders, a steaming cup of coffee beside her. A stack of envelopes rested on the table. Real mail. Handwritten notes. Letters of support. One from a woman Catherine hadn't spoken to in years. "I remember you leading our book club like it was a town hall. This whole town's behind you now." Another from a teenage girl she'd tutored briefly 5 summers ago. "I just saw what you did. My mom said you're a badass." "I agree." Catherine read each one slowly, placing them into a keepsake box with care. She didn't reply. Not yet, but she felt the warmth settle around her. Quiet, earned, not requested. Late that evening, her inbox pinged. From Ethan Boyd, subject, "Let's talk body." "Mom, I just want to say I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to go the way it did. I was under pressure, Jenna was stressed, and everything just snowballed. I'm sure you know how that feels. I miss how things used to be. I hope we can talk and find a way back to each other. Family is family. We only get one. Let me know when you're free. Love, Ethan." Catherine read the email once, then again. There were no apologies for the court filings, no mention of the lies, the social media smears, or the screaming outside her door. Just vague guilt wrapped in performance, signed with the word love, like it was a band-aid. She didn't reply. She opened a blank message, attached the email as a forward, and typed. Subject: Archive, to Harold Lynn. Message body: File this. She hit send. Outside, the wind had picked up, brushing through the eucalyptus trees like breath. Catherine closed her laptop and stood. The box of letters stayed behind, testimony of something bigger than court victories. A reputation quietly rebuilt, one truth at a time. The cottage sat on a bluff just north of Montecito, tucked behind a narrow gravel road and hidden by eucalyptus trees. No welcome mat, no name on the mailbox. Just a silver gate, a short stone path, and the quiet rhythm of the ocean crashing far below. Catherine signed the purchase papers in Harold's office with the same calm she'd shown every step of the way. The walls were thinner than her old place, the kitchen smaller. But the windows, God, the windows, stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the sea like a painting that never stopped moving. "I'll have your address protections updated by the end of the day," Harold said, sliding a final envelope toward her. "P.O. box only, no forwarding orders. Everything routes through my office now." Catherine nodded. Good. No more surprises, no more doorstep shouting, just clean separation. Distance not measured in miles, but in boundaries finally enforced. She moved in on a Wednesday, quietly. No moving truck, no furniture hauls. Just a few essentials in the back of her old Volvo, a delivery from a local consignment shop, and a stack of books she'd culled ruthlessly from her shelves. By the weekend, the place smelled faintly of cedar, fresh paint, and sea salt. She woke early that Saturday to the sound of gulls outside the window and brewed her coffee before the sun had finished rising. No city noise, no inbox full of thinly veiled threats, just light and silence, and the muffled sound of waves breaking against the cliffs below. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. She checked it without urgency. Instagram DM from Jenna Boyd Official. "We're family. That doesn't just disappear." Catherine stared at the message. She didn't open it, didn't read the rest. She tapped and held the icon. Block. Confirm. Done. The screen went dark again, and for the first time in months, she felt the digital world let go of her wrist. She finished her coffee by the window, barefoot on the hardwood, watching fog unravel along the waterline like silk being pulled from the shore. She didn't think of Ethan. She didn't wonder what they were doing. She didn't need to. That chapter had been closed not with revenge, but with finality. The kind you only get when you stop expecting answers. Later that day, a slim, official envelope arrived at Harold's office, sealed and stamped with a state crest. He opened it alone, then smiled at the contents. Inside, the final probate court transcript, signed and filed. No open matters, no pending challenges, no room left for appeals. He scanned the last page and emailed a PDF to Catherine's encrypted inbox with the subject line, "Finalized." When she received it, she was sitting in a low chair on her new deck, a blanket over her knees and a novel balanced on her lap. The sea below roared like a secret being kept on purpose. She read the document slowly, then saved it to a locked folder titled Legacy. Across town, in a short-term rental off the 101, Ethan stared at the same sea but from behind a double-pane window that didn't open. He and Jenna hadn't spoken in 2 days. Not since the last fight, the one where she threw her ring at the kitchen counter and told him to grow up, or get out. He didn't know where Catherine had gone, didn't know where she lived now, didn't even know who still took her calls. He only knew one thing. Whatever home meant now, it wasn't anywhere he'd ever be invited again. The notary arrived just after 10, dressed in a crisp button-down and carrying a slim leather briefcase. He didn't ask questions, just opened the documents, confirmed the names, dates, and witnesses, and began pointing to where Catherine needed to sign. She wore a slate gray sweater and linen pants, the sleeves pushed up just enough to reveal the gentle sinew of her forearms, arms that had once shelved thousands of books, typed hundreds of lesson plans, held one child, then watched him vanish into a man she didn't recognize. She signed without pause. Every letter of her name flowed without hesitation, her handwriting still elegant and assertive. Line after line, she sealed it. The cottage, the remaining investments, her pension, her journals. All of it assigned and accounted for. Not to Ethan, not to blood, but to purpose. To the library trust. To the senior literacy program she'd quietly helped build for nearly a decade without so much as a plaque or photo on a wall. When she was done, the notary gathered the forms, stamped them, slid them into a sealed envelope, and said, "It's all official now. No questions down the line." "Good," she said. "I like clean endings." After he left, Catherine stepped out onto her porch and sat with a fresh cup of tea, the early sun just beginning to warm the wood beneath her feet. The ocean below was calm today, distant but certain, like a truth she no longer had to chase. That afternoon, she opened her inbox to find a dozen new messages, subject lines full of soft nostalgia. "Catherine, thank you. What you gave me, I still use today. You taught me to read again and to love it." Former colleagues, old students, one retired principal, even a janitor from her teaching days who now volunteered at the literacy center downtown. Somehow, word had gotten out. Quietly, but clearly. The trust had posted its new donor wall. Catherine Boyd's name had been added at the top, etched in brass. She didn't respond to the emails immediately. Instead, She opened a new folder on her desktop and began saving each message one by one. She named it Letters Worth Keeping. At the bottom of the stack on her desk sat one last legal form, an amendment to her estate plan. Ethan's name, once tentatively included under a secondary beneficiary clause, had been struck from every page. Line by line, removed. There would be no confusion later. No appeals. No technicalities. She read it over once more before forwarding it to Harold with a 2-word subject line. Confirmed removal. Outside, the soil in her small backyard garden had finally softened from the early fall rain. Catherine knelt in the earth, her palms pressing gently into the dirt. A small tray beside her held 6 lavender plants, compact, silvery green, already fragrant in the breeze. She planted each one slowly, methodically, like building something that would outlast her. One row along the edge of the stone path, another beneath the bedroom window. She tamped down the roots, whispered to the soil without words, and sat back on her heels when the last plant was in. From the garden she could hear the faint wind moving through the trees, the hush of the tide, and peace. Real peace, not the kind she had once begged for, quiet, with conditions, but the kind she'd claimed, earned, signed into law. She stood, brushing soil from her knees, and stepped back to admire the work. 6 plants, 6 decisions, no regrets. Back inside, the light on her phone blinked once, an automated update from the Trust's back-end portal. Catherine E. Boyd, primary donor file updated, beneficiary verified. No one else was copied. No one else had access. And from that moment forward, there was no longer a line connecting Ethan Boyd to her legacy. Not legally, not financially, not by name. Only silence and lavender. The temporary rental off the 101 smelled like old carpet and lemon-scented cleaning fluid, the kind they used between guests, but never quite got right. The air conditioning rattled. The curtains were crooked. The view, technically ocean-facing, was mostly rooflines and parking lot. Ethan sat slouched at the edge of the pull-out sofa, scrolling job listings he wasn't qualified for. His phone vibrated twice, then once more. Nothing important. A student loan ad, a spam email, Jenna tagging herself in a story he hadn't been invited to. He looked up and around. Jenna's makeup bag was gone from the bathroom. Her clothes were missing from the hall closet. The ring, an antique his mother had once worn, passed down before Ethan thought to ask permission, sat alone on the kitchen counter. The band facing upward like it was watching him. He didn't remember the exact moment she left. There hadn't been a fight. Just a long, stretched silence that eventually gave way to empty drawers. She posted 2 days later. Selfie in a new apartment, bright walls and potted plants behind her. Lip gloss, a soft focus filter. The caption read, "New beginnings. The past doesn't define the future, neither do ex-in-laws." Ethan didn't like it. He didn't comment, but he read every single reply. "Good for you, Queen." Cut the dead weight. We all saw what his mom did. You dodged the bullet. His face burned. He slammed the phone onto the mattress and stood, pacing. He tried opening the window. It was painted shut. Across town, Catherine was kneeling again, this time not in soil, but in the coat room of a women's shelter she'd once volunteered at during her retirement transition. She was dropping off 3 large boxes of coats, gloves, and boots, all tagged and cleaned. The staff thanked her quietly. She didn't tell them about the donation from her foundation, not yet. She didn't need a plaque on the wall or a speech at the holiday banquet. She just wanted the money to arrive in full, in time, and without condition. Harold, always one step ahead, had already prepared the legacy account. $75,000 earmarked for long-term shelter programming. All anonymous, all tracked. The paperwork was clean, the routing secure. That same morning, Cheryl Dean sat in her office at the courthouse, finalizing the last page of the Boyd probate file. Her email to Catherine was short and professional. Subject: Case. Afram 435C. Final status. Dear Mrs. Boyd, this letter serves as confirmation of the permanent closure of your probate file. There are no remaining claims or pending actions. You are now fully discharged of all administrative responsibilities. Thank you for your exceptional clarity and organization throughout this process. Regards, Cheryl Dean, Probate Liaison. Catherine read the message from her deck, the scent of lavender in the air, her tea cooling beside her. She didn't reply right away, just sat with the weight of it. Done. Truly. Legally. Done. Later that evening, she walked the beach trail near her cottage, a long wool cardigan wrapped around her shoulders, the sky turning mauve and slate above the horizon. She passed no one, just the occasional heron lifting off from the rocks and the rhythmic hush of the sea. Back in the rental, Ethan sat in the glow of the television, half watching a news segment about a community reading initiative funded by a recent state grant. He wasn't paying attention until he heard it. The Catherine E. Boyd Foundation will match the $150,000 grant for senior literacy expansion, with programs launching next spring across 6 counties. Ethan's mouth parted slowly. The screen showed a still photo of the donor wall, Catherine's name etched cleanly across the top. Then came B-roll of volunteers in library vans, handing out books, a woman reading aloud in a circle of seniors. He stood, disoriented, as if the floor had shifted. He hadn't even known she'd applied for a state grant. He didn't know she had a foundation. He'd spent months screaming about what had been taken. And somehow, she'd been quietly building something permanent. Without him. He turned the TV off and sat in the dark. Outside the window, a neighbor's wind chime clinked softly in the breeze. The Santa Barbara Library hadn't hosted a full-capacity event since pre-pandemic author readings. But that Saturday, the community room buzzed with anticipation. Folding chairs were packed shoulder to shoulder, tables lined with tea cookies and folded programs. Someone had printed bookmarks with the quote, "Literacy is legacy, not luxury, CEB." Catherine hadn't approved the quote. But she didn't object. She sat in the second-to-last row, a soft navy shawl draped over her shoulders, her hands resting in her lap. From this distance, she could see everything but still remain mostly unseen. Just how she liked it. On stage, the director of the Literacy Alliance tapped the microphone, cheeks flushed with excitement. This year's community expansion grant wouldn't have existed without one donor. She didn't ask for naming rights. She didn't request a single press release. She just asked that we do the work, and do it well. Applause swelled through the room. Phones went up. Cameras clicked. Catherine smiled briefly. But she didn't stand. She didn't wave. She just nodded, eyes soft, as the light filtered through the stained glass windows overhead and landed on the corner of the stage, where 6 children from the after-school reading program sat flipping through picture books, unaware of the speech, the crowd, or the reason they were even here. That, Catherine thought, was enough. Near the end of the program, someone tapped her shoulder gently. It was Nina, holding a small bouquet of white tulips and a note tied to the stem. "From the new owners," she whispered. "They wanted you to know the house feels light now, like it's breathing again." Catherine took the flowers, brought them to her nose and inhaled. "Tell them thank you," she said. Nina squeezed her hand. "You're glowing." Catherine chuckled. "It's the lavender oil." A burst of laughter from the front row. Harold had just taken the mic. He wore his usual charcoal gray blazer, slightly crooked tie, and the look of a man who knew exactly how rare these moments were. "You know," he said, "not all clients end up on foundation walls, and fewer still do it without asking for recognition." He turned toward Catherine, raised his glass of iced tea, and added, Catherine Boyd didn't just write her will, she rewrote her story. The room applauded again. Some stood. She didn't, but her eyes shimmered. In the silence after the event, Catherine walked the long hallway of the library alone, hand trailing lightly along the spines of books she'd shelved decades earlier. The air smelled of old paper and lemon wax, and the hum of the overhead lights was the same as it had always been. She turned a corner and stopped at the donor wall. Her name was there, carved into metal, understated, permanent. She touched it only once, then kept walking. Outside, the fog had rolled in from the coast, turning the streets damp and gold beneath the lamplight. She reached her car, unlocked it with a soft beep, and paused before getting in. There had been no text from Ethan. No congratulations, no apology, no attempt. He hadn't come. Not that she expected him to. But some quiet part of her had wondered, if only to confirm what she already knew. This chapter didn't include him. At a small cafe across town, Ethan scrolled past the photo someone had tagged him in. A wide shot of the event, crowd mid-applause, Catherine's name visible on the screen behind the speaker. He didn't click on it. He didn't need to. He set his phone face down, stood, and left the cafe without paying. He didn't notice the barista watching him go, didn't notice the sign by the register. Today's Roundup donation support, the Catherine Boyd Literacy Trust. The trail curved along the bluff just beyond Catherine's cottage, a worn footpath lined with wild sage and saltgrass, the kind of place that didn't need direction. It just pulled you forward. She walked it at dawn, as she often did now, cardigan wrapped around her ribs, boots soft against the sand-packed earth. The ocean below breathed steady and deep, waves rolling in like pages turning at their own pace. In her coat pocket was a letter. She'd opened it at breakfast, tea still steaming beside her, the edges of the envelope slightly crumpled from the mailbag. The return address had been handwritten, Riverside, California, a name she didn't recognize, but the first line stopped her cold. I'm the first in my family to graduate high school. Your scholarship covered my books. Thank you for believing in someone you never met. It went on. Not flowery, just honest. A girl who had once read Charlotte's Web in a school hallway while her siblings were in the principal's office. Who now wanted to become a literacy advocate herself. Who signed the note with 2 underlines beneath her name, Rosa, as if willing her own signature to carry weight. Catherine folded the letter and slipped it back into her coat. She reached the end of the bluff and stood still. The light was shifting now, gold through mist. In the distance, 2 surfers waded into the tide, boards bobbing behind them like shadows. There was no noise, but wind. No noise at all. Later that morning, she parked downtown and wandered into the tiny independent bookstore tucked between the bakery and the tailor, the same one she used to take Ethan to as a boy. There, on the front display, a new hardcover first edition of The Giver. She hadn't read it in years, but it had always made her think about memory, inheritance, the burden and gift of remembering everything. It felt right. She bought it for herself, wrapped in brown paper. No ribbon, no inscription, just clean pages waiting. When she got home, her phone buzzed once with a text from Cheryl Dean. You're one hell of a case study. If I ever teach probate law, you're the whole final exam. Catherine smiled, typed back, only if you grade on emotional curve. Cheryl replied with a single emoji, scales of justice, and nothing else. That afternoon, Catherine opened the cedar trunk at the foot of her bed. Inside, a velvet pouch with jewelry she no longer wore. Her late husband's reading glasses, a stack of old birthday cards, and a photo. Ethan, age 7, gap-toothed and freckled, holding up a library card like it was a passport to something big. She stared at it a long while, then, quietly, placed the photo in a manila envelope, sealed it, and added it to a separate box marked simply, "Stored. Not forgotten. Just done. No fire. No fanfare." She didn't need to erase him. He'd already chosen to leave. The sea breeze pushed gently against the window, and Catherine stood, stretching her back. Outside, the lavender was blooming brighter than she expected this late in the season. A surprise gift. Maybe not every seed was wasted, but some weren't meant to stay rooted in the same garden forever. She walked into her study, placed the new hardcover on the bookshelf beside a line of other first editions, all gifts to herself over the years. Then, before she logged off for the night, she opened her encrypted inbox to check one last detail. Harold had sent the final balance summary from the trust: scholarship disbursements, foundation reserves, personal estate, no contested claims, no pending revisions. Just one attached note in his signature voice. "If peace could be itemized, I'd call this a surplus." Catherine closed the laptop, stepped outside, and watched the horizon for a long time. There was nothing left to explain. No courtroom left to enter, no inbox left to guard. She had lived long enough to be betrayed, underestimated, manipulated, and longer still to outlast it all. She had not just survived the worst of her son's entitlement. She had named it, recorded it, and folded it into something useful. As the fog rolled in again, quiet as breath, Catherine turned back toward the door and whispered one last truth. No bitterness, no rage, just clarity. He whispered his greed into a lawyer's ear. "I wrote my revenge into the will.